My mother locked Seraphine's pearl veil over my face while her empty wedding carriage waited below. Hold still, Elara. Her fingers pulled the silver comb through my hair hard enough to sting. Candlelight trembled across Seraphine's abandoned room, catching on an overturned perfume bottle and the open window above her bed. Cold air carried the smell of pine and horse sweat through the curtains. On the pillow lay a single strip of paper. I will not marry a beast. No apology. No farewell. Only Seraphine's name pressed into the page in violet ink. I reached for it, but my mother snatched it away and fed it to the nearest candle. The paper curled black. She may return. She crossed the southern bridge before dawn, my father said from the doorway. Rain darkened the shoulders of his ceremonial coat. Behind him stood two Ver officers in gray armor, their gloved hands resting on their sword belts. The Wolf Lord's escort is already at the village gate. Then tell them the truth. My voice sounded thin beneath the veil. One officer opened a leather ledger. Its pages rasped in the silence. My father did not look at me. If the bride named in the treaty fails to arrive, House Ver forfeits the valley. I stared past him through the window. Far below, lanterns burned beside the mill, the bakery, and the row of cottages along the river. My village. Children had tied white ribbons to the fences that morning, believing Seraphine's marriage would buy them peace. Forfeits it to whom? I asked. The officer answered without blinking. To the Ver army. The homes will become barracks. The grain stores will be requisitioned before nightfall. My mother lifted Seraphine's wedding gown from its cedar chest. Moon threads shimmered across the ivory fabric, beautiful and cold as frost. It only has to deceive them until the vows are sealed. You want me to marry the Wolf Lord under her name? No one denied it. The room smelled suddenly of hot wax and burned ink. I could hear the carriage horses stamping in the courtyard, iron shoes striking stone like a countdown. My father placed Seraphine's signet ring in my palm and closed my fingers around it. One daughter protects hundreds. And what protects me? His grip loosened. That was answer enough. My mother dressed me quickly. The gown pinched beneath my ribs and dragged heavily over the floor, cut for Seraphine's taller frame. She lowered the pearl veil until the room fractured into pale, blurred shapes. I could no longer see their faces clearly. Perhaps that made leaving easier. At the foot of the stairs, the villagers waited in silence. Flour dust coated the baker's sleeves. The blacksmith held his youngest son against his chest. Old Mara, who had taught me which herbs eased fever, touched 2 fingers to her lips when I passed. None of them knew the wrong sister walked beneath the veil. I stopped beside the carriage. My hand shook once against the brass handle, then stilled. If I go, the soldiers withdraw? The officer snapped the ledger shut. At once. Then order it. This time, my voice did not shake. A horn sounded beyond the gate. Gray-armored riders turned their horses away from the cottages, and the road to the valley cleared. I climbed inside before anyone could mistake my choice for surrender. The door slammed, sealing me in darkness scented with leather, cedar, and Seraphine's roses. As the wheels began to turn, my father called my name only once. I did not lift the curtain. By sunset, the village bells had faded behind me. Ahead, black towers rose from the mountains, their windows burning gold beneath a silver moon. Wolves paced along the fortress walls. Then the carriage slowed, and a deep howl rolled down the stone road. The Wolf Lord was waiting for the bride he had been promised, and I was wearing her face. Silver bells rang once, and every wolf in the moon hall fell silent. Cold mountain air followed Elara through the bronze doors, carrying pine smoke across a floor polished black as still water. Beneath Seraphine's pearl veil, each breath tasted of roses and deceit. At the far end of the hall, Lucian waited beneath an open arch where moonlight poured over the altar. He wore no crown. A dark mantle rested across his shoulders, fastened by a silver wolf's head, and his stillness held more authority than the armed guards lining the pillars. Elara crossed the hall alone. The borrowed gown whispered over stone. When she reached him, Lucian offered his hand. His palm was warm, roughened along the fingers, not the hand of a lord who ruled from a chair. The instant their skin touched, his gaze sharpened. Seraphine's portrait had been exchanged before the treaty. Lucian should have known the bride's narrow hands, her floral perfume, the practiced tilt of her chin. Elara had herb stains beneath one thumbnail, and a faint burn across her wrist from Mara's copper kettle. Lucian noticed everything. His thumb paused over her pulse. Then his eyes lifted to the veil. "Begin," he ordered. A murmur stirred among the witnesses, but the moon priest raised a silver cup. Elara expected Lucian to tear away the veil. One word from him would expose House Vare's fraud, restore his honor, and send her back to whatever punishment awaited beyond the mountains. Instead, he drank from the cup and passed it to her. Bitter winterberry touched her tongue. The priest wound a white cord around their joined wrists. "Before the moon, do you receive this woman beneath your protection?" Lucian could still stop it. His jaw tightened. "I receive her." The cord warmed against Elara's skin. A pale gleam flickered beneath it, so brief she mistook it for reflected moonlight. The priest turned toward her. "Do you enter this fortress by your own vow?" Her mother's command returned with the scrape of a bolt sliding shut. The Vare officer's ledger. The horn that had withdrawn soldiers from the valley. Elara looked through the veil at the man who already knew. "I enter," she said, refusing the lie hidden in the rest of the question. The priest struck the altar bell. The sound rolled through the rafters, solemn and irreversible. Lucian had completed the marriage while fully aware that the wrong sister stood beside him. By ancient fortress law, exposing her now would also expose his deliberate acceptance of the deception. He had placed his own honor inside the trap with hers. The witnesses bowed and began filing from the hall. Only when the bronze doors closed did Lucian lift his free hand. Elara flinched, but he did not seize her. He loosened the veil from its silver pins and lowered it carefully. Cool air touched her face. His gray eyes studied the unfamiliar features beneath Seraphine's pearls, then settled on the red mark the veil had pressed into her temple. "You are not Seraphine." It was not an accusation. "No, your name." "Elara." A distant howl trembled through the archway. Lucian unwound the ceremonial cord, but kept one end around his wrist. "I could ask why House Vare deceived me," he said. "But that is not the question that matters." He stepped closer, lowering his voice until the words belonged only to them. "Who forced you to come here?" Elara's fingers closed around the pearls at her throat. For the first time since the carriage door had slammed, someone had looked at her and seen neither a treaty nor a substitute. Footsteps approached beyond the bronze doors, quick and armored. Lucian waited, giving her one breath to choose between protecting the family that had sacrificed her and trusting the Wolf Lord who had just bound his honor to her lie. "My village," she whispered, "was the price." The door handles began to turn. Lucian moved between Elara and whoever was entering. "Then until I know who demanded that price," he said, "no one in this fortress will take you from me." A child's cry sliced through the eastern courtyard, thin and sharp beneath the clang of practiced swords. Frost silvered the flagstones, and smoke from the fortress chimneys carried the bitter scent of pine into the morning air. Elara stopped beneath an archway. 30 feet away, a young servant knelt beside a shattered silver pitcher while 2 guards stood over him. Water darkened his gray tunic. One guard held a braided leather strap. 3 strokes for spilling at the officer's table," he said. "Hold out your hands." The boy obeyed, though his fingers shook so badly they could not remain flat. Elara crossed the courtyard before caution could harden around her ankles. No faces turned. The guard lowered the strap without releasing it. "This is pack discipline, my lady." He dropped a pitcher. He entered the officer's gallery without permission. The boy's eyes darted toward Elara. "Cook sent me." "I didn't know." "Silence," the second guard snapped. Elara stepped between them, her wedding skirts brushing shards of cold metal. "Then punish the person who failed to teach him your rules." A murmur moved through the watching servants. Above them, wolf banners cracked in the wind. The first guard's jaw tightened. "A new bride may observe fortress law. She may not interfere with it. I am not asking what brides are permitted to do." Elara took the strap from his hand and laid it across her own palms. "I am telling you that striking a child for another adult's failure is cowardice." The courtyard went still. Lucian stood beneath the opposite colonnade, dressed in black wool and an unfastened sword belt. He had arrived unnoticed. Elara waited for him to dismiss the guards, but he did not move. "The law demands a penalty," the guard said, now looking toward his lord. "Then give it to me." The words left Elara in a white breath. "I stopped the punishment. Charge me with interfering." Lucian's gaze remained fixed on her. "Do you understand the consequence?" "Say it plainly." "Until the council reviews the offense, you lose the privileges of my household. No personal attendance." No seat beside me at formal meals. No voice in packed disputes. The judgment stripped away every protection attached to the gown she wore. Elara set the strap on the stone. Then I accept. Lucian finally approached. Heat seemed to travel with him despite the frost, carrying the clean scent of cedar and winter air. He looked at the servant boy, returned to the kitchens. The child fled, shoes slapping against the flagstones. Lucian did not overturn Elara's penalty. He faced the guards instead. From this morning forward, no servant under 16 is to be disciplined without a steward present. Write it into fortress law. Surprise flickered across both men's faces. Yes, my lord. As the courtyard emptied, Elara gathered her skirts and turned toward the servants' passage, where a bride without privileges was expected to walk. Lucian caught neither her wrist nor her sleeve. Elara. She looked back. His eyes held no trace of the guarded pity she had seen at the altar. He inclined his head, the measured acknowledgement one ruler gave another after a contested decision. You surrendered your place at my side for a child whose name you did not know. Someone had to stand beside him. A bronze bell thundered from the council tower. Once, twice, then a third time, the summons reserved for accusations against the ruling house. Lucian's expression sharpened as doors opened along the upper gallery. And now, he said quietly, we discover who intends to make you pay for standing at all. The chief counselor appeared above them, holding Seraphine's marriage contract and Elara's broken seal. Wolf Lord, he called. The council demands judgment upon the false bride. Cold moonlight spilled across the council chamber as iron doors slammed shut behind the last elder. The sound rolled through the circular hall, rattling the silver wolf emblems above the tribunal. Elara stood below them in the borrowed wedding gown, its moon-thread hem darkened by melted frost. Lucian took his place beside her rather than on the raised stone reserved for the Wolf Lord. Across the chamber, the chief counselor laid Seraphine's marriage contract on a blackwood table. Beside it, he placed Elara's broken seal. Wax clicked against wood. The treaty names Seraphine, he said. The woman before us admits she is Elara. His finger struck the contract. Therefore, the union is void. A murmur moved through the elders like wind through dry leaves. Elara's ring suddenly felt too tight. The chief counselor lifted a second document, its edges stamped with the fortress crest. House Vere demands that the impostor be returned for judgment. Fraud against an alliance is punishable under their law. Lucian's voice remained quiet. She will not be returned. The counselor's gray brows tightened. You heard the finding. I heard men call coercion consent. Lucian stepped forward, and torchlight caught the gold at the edges of his eyes. Elara crossed my threshold because Vere threatened her village. I completed the vows after recognizing the deception. If you require someone to answer for this marriage, question me. Elara turned toward him. Until that moment, she had believed his silence at the altar had merely delayed her punishment. Now he was placing himself inside it. The counselor raised a narrow iron rod from the table, the marshal's staff, engraved with the names of every wolf lord who had commanded the northern army. The army belongs to the throne only while the throne obeys pack law. Surrender, Elara, and your command remains intact. Snow hissed against the high windows. Somewhere beneath the chamber, wolves began to pace, their claws scraping stone in restless rhythm. Lucian looked at the staff, then at Elara. No hand reached for hers. No promise softened what stood between them. No, the word landed harder than a shout. The chief counselor brought the iron rod down across both palms. The chamber answered with one unanimous strike of fists against stone. Then, by council authority, Lucian of the Moon Fortress is suspended from military command. The Northern Army will no longer answer his summons. His claim to succession will be reviewed at the next full moon. A commander approached Lucian and removed the silver clasp from his shoulder. Metal dragged across dark wool before dropping into the counselor's waiting hand. Lucian did not resist. Elara watched the empty place the clasp had left. Hours earlier, she had surrendered a seat, a ceremonial voice, and the comforts of a bride. He had just surrendered the force that guarded every road to his throne. Lucian, she whispered, you cannot lose your kingdom for me. His jaw shifted, but his gaze remained on the council. I did not lose command for you. I refused to purchase it with you. The chief counselor gathered the contract and broken seal. Without an army, you cannot hold this fortress indefinitely. At sunrise tomorrow, Vare's delegation will arrive to collect Elara. If she remains under this roof when the Eastern bell rings, the council will begin proceedings to strip you of succession entirely. The doors opened, pouring blue winter light across the floor. Elara looked from Lucian's bare shoulder to the soldiers who no longer bowed to him. By sunrise, one of them would have to choose what the other was allowed to lose. The eastern gate groaned open before dawn, its chains rattling through the sleeping fortress. Snow hissed across the threshold, and beyond the walls, a riderless mare waited beneath a cedar, steam curling from her dark flanks. Lucian stood beside the raised portcullis without his marshal's clasp. A plain wool cloak covered his shoulders, but nothing could hide the pale strip where command had rested only hours before. Elara approached through the blue darkness, her borrowed veil stirring against her cheek. "The western trail avoids Vare's roads," he said. "By midday, you can cross beyond council reach." He placed the reins in her gloved hand. The leather was warm from his grip. "And when they ask where I went, I will say I sent you away. They will take your succession." A bell sounded faintly inside the fortress. Lucian looked toward the unseen towers. "A throne that requires your chains is not mine to keep." The mare shifted, crushing frost beneath one hoof. Elara could mount. She could leave the false name, the hostile council, and the marriage she had never chosen behind her. Lucian had opened the gate himself. Yet the choice tasted no different from the covered cup her mother had pressed into her hands before the wedding. Someone else deciding who must be sacrificed so the valley could sleep safely. Elara closed Lucian's fingers around the reins. "You asked who forced me to come here," she said. "No one is forcing me to stay." Then she turned away from freedom. By the time Lucian followed, the eastern bell had begun to toll. Its iron voice rolled through corridors smelling of smoke, pine resin, and cold stone. Wolves emerged from barracks and kitchens, fastening cloaks as Elara crossed the courtyard toward the great hall. The chief counselor was already beneath the carved rafters, preparing sealed documents for Vare's arrival. Conversation died when the false bride entered. Elara climbed the central steps alone. No escort shielded her. No borrowed name opened the way. At the foot of the moon altar, she reached behind her head and untied the veil. The silver fabric slid across her shoulders and fell onto the black floor. Torchlight exposed her face to the entire pack. "I am Elara," she said, "Seraphine's younger sister." Murmurs struck the pillars like rain. The chief counselor rose. "Your confession places you under Vare judgment." Then recorded accurately. Her voice trembled once, and she steadied it. "I did not enter this fortress for love. I came because House Vare threatened my village, and I wore my sister's veil because I believed obedience was the only way to save them." Lucian stopped several yards behind her. For once, he did not step between Elara and those judging her. This choice belonged wholly to her. She faced the assembled pack. Lucian knew before the vows were completed. He could have exposed me and preserved his command. Instead, he asked who had forced me here. Her gaze found the bare place on his shoulder. "I will not escape while an innocent man is punished for refusing to surrender me. I remain as Elara, by my own will." Silence followed, deep enough to hear the fire snap. Then the eastern doors opened. Wind scattered snow across the floor as the Vare delegation entered beneath its crimson standard. The officer at its head looked from the discarded veil to Elara's uncovered face. "If you stay," he said, "you will answer not only for fraud, but for choosing this marriage after the truth was known." Elara stepped down from the altar and took her place beside Lucian. "Then let the judgment begin." A bronze censer swung above the tribunal floor, spilling bitter smoke into the cold air. Its chain gave one sharp crack. Then every flame in the great hall turned blue. Lucian's hand closed around Elara's before the first growl tore from his throat. Heat surged through his palm, fierce enough to sting, while beneath his skin something moved like a beast striking iron bars. Across the hall, the Vare officer stepped back. The guards reached for their swords. "No weapons," Lucian forced out. His voice had split into two tones. "You'll give it something to fight." A dark line spread from beneath his wedding cuff and climbed his wrist in branching veins. Elara caught the scent of scorched cedar, the incense used during their vows, now sharpened by something metallic and wrong. Someone had poisoned the ceremonial smoke, but there was no time to search for the hand behind it. Lucian's shoulders convulsed. His eyes burned gold, then black, then gold again. Claws scored the stone as his fingers changed against the floor. "Clear the hall," the chief counselor shouted. Panic broke the tribunal apart. Boots hammered over marble. Benches scraped. The Vare officer seized Elara's arm, trying to pull her toward the doors. She twisted free. "Lucian." At the sound of his name, the half-shifted Wolf Lord turned toward her. His breath came in harsh clouds. The creature inside him recognized the woman beside him, but the curse twisted recognition into hunger, fear, and fury. He took one step forward. Elara did not move. A silver blur struck the floor between them. Lucian had ripped open the iron cabinet beneath the moon altar and dragged out the fortress-binding chains, links reserved for wolves who could no longer command themselves. Even through leather gloves, the silver smoked against his hands. "Help me fasten them," he said. The chief counselor froze. "Those chains can sever your wolf permanently. Without it, your claim to succession ends." Lucian looked only at Elara. A tremor ran through his jaw as his fangs lengthened. "That is why they will hold." Another spasm drove him to one knee. Elara reached for the chain, but Lucian snapped the first shackle around his own wrist and locked the second to the altar ring. Silver light raced over the links. The smell of burned wool filled the hall. "Go," he warned her. Instead, Elara caught the loose chain before it could whip across the stone. She wound it around the iron pillar, giving him the leverage he needed without touching the silver to his skin. Lucian understood. Together, they pulled. One link at a time. One choice at a time. The final shackle closed around his other wrist. The sound was small. Final. The wolf's roar shook dust from the rafters, then collapsed into a broken exhale. Lucian sagged against the pillar, human again. His gold eyes faded to a dim gray. No answering power stirred beneath his skin. No wolf pressed toward Elara's scent. Only silence remained. The chief counselor knelt, 2 fingers hovering over Lucian's pulse. "The bond is sealed," he said. "If the wolf does not return before the next moonrise, it never will." Lucian lifted his head with visible effort. "Is she safe?" Elara sank beside him and wrapped both hands around his cold, unshackled fingers. "Yes." His gaze rested on her uncovered face. Then the price was mine to choose. Behind them, the Vare officer lifted the fallen censer with the edge of his cloak. A black wax seal clung beneath its rim, softened by heat. "This curse was placed inside the hall," he said, "by someone who knew the wedding incense would be burned again for judgment." The council bell began to toll above the fortress. At its final stroke, Lucian would be declared wolfless, and the succession would pass beyond his reach. Elara tightened her grip as the first bell thundered through the stone. "Then we learn who wanted your wolf gone before they take your crown." Cold moonlight crept across the tribunal floor while the second bell rolled through the fortress. Its iron voice stirred dust from the rafters and made the extinguished incense tremble in its bowl. Elara released Lucian's chilled hand only when she noticed a thin line of black wax beneath her wedding sleeve. It matched the seal under the censer. Not fresh wax. Older, pressed into the gown's inner seam. Seraphine's gown. Elara tore the hidden stitches with numb fingers. A folded letter slipped onto the stone, carrying the faint scent of lavender beneath the bitter smoke. Seraphine had always sealed private letters with lavender oil. Elara broke the black crest. "Little sister," the letter began, "if mother chooses you, do not resist. The regent needs the false bride inside the fortress." The words sharpened beneath the moonlight. Seraphine had not merely fled. She had agreed to send Elara in her place, knowing the exposed deception would break the alliance. The regent would blame Lucian for abducting an unwilling woman, turn Vare's army against the wolf packs, and claim the empty throne once Lucian lost command, or his life. The cursed incense had been their second path to victory. Elara carried the letter into the center of the hall. Her wedding shoes scraped over stones still cold from the silver chains. "The bride was never meant to survive the lie," she said. Lucian pushed himself upright against the altar, his breathing shallow in the unnatural silence left by his wolf. Neither was the groom. The chief counselor reached for the letter, but a pale radiance spilled between Elara's fingers. Heat raced across her palm. She opened her hand. A crescent mark burned beneath the skin, silver white and unmistakable. Every wolf in the chamber lowered their head. "The moon's choosing," the chief counselor whispered. The true bond did not answer Seraphine. It answered Elara. The Vare officer stepped away from the censor. Then the marriage is lawful. No, Lucian's voice cut through the chamber. Weak as he was, the single word stopped them. He met Elara's gaze instead of the council's. The mark proves fate recognized her. It does not give fate the right to command her heart. The warmth in Elara's palm met the cold ring around her finger. For the first time since the veil had covered her face, no mother, council, army, or moon could choose what came next. The chief counselor unfolded the letter beside the black seal. This exposes the regent and Seraphine. But evidence must be presented at the succession hearing before the final bell. Elara may annul the marriage, surrender the mark, and return under Vare protection. Lucian will face judgment alone. Another bell struck. Lucian's fingers tightened against the altar, but he did not ask her to stay. That silence cost more than any plea. Elara closed her glowing hand around the letter and faced the sealed doors of the hearing chamber. Beyond them waited the elders who could restore Lucian's crown, or take it forever. Open the court, she said. They wanted a false bride to begin a war. They will answer to the woman who chose to remain. The final bell shuddered above the hearing chamber, scattering dust from the rafters as the bronze doors swung inward. Moonlight pooled across the black stone floor, cold enough to silver every breath. Elara entered beside Lucian, carrying Seraphine's letter in one hand while the crescent on her other palm burned beneath the elder's stare. The chief counselor raised the annulment decree. Renounce the vow, surrender the mark, and House Vare will escort you home. A warm cloak settled around Elara's shoulders as the Vare officer stepped forward. Safety stood 6 feet away. Lucian remained near the moon altar, pale beneath the iron circlet, his wolf still silent. Take it, he said. No throne is worth your freedom. Elara removed the cloak and placed it across the empty witness chair. Then stop offering my freedom as though it only means leaving. The regent rose among the elders, his rings scraping the table. Seraphine stood beside him, her face bloodless in the blue light. The girl admits she was a false bride, he said. Her vow has no power. Elara laid the letter beside the black wax seal. Seraphine lunged for it, but the chief counselor caught the page first. His voice carried through the chamber as he read her confession. The substituted bride, the broken alliance, the cursed incense, the war meant to empty Lucian's throne. Seraphine's composure cracked. You were supposed to run, she whispered. You always obeyed. That is why you chose me. Elara turned toward the altar. It is also why you failed. The regent demanded the guards arrest her, but no one moved. The moon mark had begun spreading luminous threads around Elara's wrist, and matching shadows coiled beneath Lucian's skin where the silver chains had scarred him. The chief counselor's face tightened. The curse is consuming what remains of his bond. Sharing it may leave you marked for life. If his wolf never returns, neither of you can undo the vow. Lucian stepped between Elara and the altar. No, for the first time, command had vanished from his voice. You owe me nothing. Elara took his cold hand and placed it over the ring she had worn under another woman's veil. I owed you nothing when they forced me here. What I do now is mine. She spoke the wedding vow again, not Seraphine's name, but her own. Silver fire raced from Lucian's scars into Elara's crescent. The chamber filled with the scent of winter pine and burned incense. Pain folded her to one knee, yet her fingers locked around his. Lucian knelt with her, sharing the weight instead of pulling away. Then a deep growl rolled through the stone. Not wild. Answering. The iron circlet flared as Lucian's wolf returned, and the succession bell split with a single thunderous crack. The regent's authority died with its echo. The elders ordered him and Seraphine seized, while the Vare officer declared the alliance valid under the moon's choosing and Elara's voluntary vow. Lucian rose with his power restored, but he removed the circlet and placed it in Elara's hands. The throne is mine again, he said before the silent court. Our marriage is not. When judgment is finished, you will decide whether it ends or begins. Warm metal pressed into her marked palm as every elder lowered their gaze. Elara had claimed the right to stay. Now she would have to decide whether she could choose him. Dawn entered the hearing chamber through the fractured roof, turning the dust above the moon altar into drifting gold. The air still smelled of extinguished incense and cold iron, but no bell sounded now. Elara stood beneath that quiet with Lucian's circlet resting between her palms. Around them, The elders waited without raising their eyes. Seraphine and the regent had been taken below to await judgment. The Vare officer had withdrawn every threat against the valley. Nothing remained to force Elara forward. That freedom weighed more than the bridal veil ever had. Lucian waited several paces away, stripped of crown and command cloak. His wolf lived again. She could feel its steady presence beneath his skin, but he made no move to claim her. "The gates are open," he said. "Your mother has been told the village is safe. If you leave, no rider will follow." Elara crossed the moonlit floor. Instead of returning the circlet, she set it upon the altar beside the silver chains that had nearly cost him his wolf. Then she pulled Seraphine's wedding ring from her finger. It struck the stone with a small, bright sound. "That marriage was hers," Elara said. "A bargain made by people who never asked me." Lucian's jaw tightened, yet he remained still. Elara reached for the fastening at her shoulder and let the borrowed bridal mantle slide into the dust. Beneath it, she wore a simple gray gown brought from the fortress stores, plain, unmarked, entirely her own. "I came here hidden behind my sister's veil. I spoke vows because soldiers were waiting outside my home." Her marked palm opened between them, the silver crescent glowing softly in the morning chill. "The moon may have recognized me. It did not choose for me." A low murmur passed through the elders, then faded when Elara stepped onto the altar. This time, she extended her hand first. "Lucian, Wolf Lord of this fortress, will you wed Elara? Not Seraphine's replacement, not the moon's answer, and not a debt you must protect." His breath caught. The powerful man who had faced a tribunal without bowing lowered himself to one knee, bringing his eyes level with her offered hand rather than taking it. "Only if Elara chooses the man who may lose crowns, strength, and certainty again," he said. "Only if she remains free to stand beside me, not behind me." Warmth moved through her palm when his fingers finally touched hers. "Then rise," she whispered. "I choose you." Lucian stood, and they repeated the vows without incense, veils, or armed witnesses at the doors. When he promised her his name, Elara gave him her truth. When she promised to remain, it was not forever demanded from a frightened bride. It was tomorrow freely offered, and every tomorrow to be chosen again. The Vare officer placed the circlet back in Lucian's hands, but Lucian lifted it over Elara instead. He did not crown her. He held it out. Elara took one side, and together they set it between them upon the altar, a throne shared, never used as a chain. Outside, the fortress gates opened to the valley. Sunlight spilled over the battlements, warm against stones still wet with frost, while wolves across the mountains raised a single answering call. Lucian bent close, waiting until Elara closed the final inch between them. Their kiss was gentle, brief, and witnessed by a court that finally understood the difference between fate and consent. She had arrived wearing another woman's veil, but she became the Wolf Lord's wife only when she stood before him as herself and said yes.